Mayor Ronaldo Apostol.
Mayor.
Kabanggan, Mr. President. Mayor Ronaldo Apostol, guest of our dear colleague Senator Jingo Estrada. Kabanggan na Sambales. Mali itong...
I believe we also have, together with my friend, Mr. Charlie Llamas, we have the president of one of the state universities.
Yes, they're here, Mr. President, and we welcome them, Mr. President.
Laguna State
Laguna.
Polytechnic University
Yes,
is with
Mr.
us, the president. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Welcome to your Senate, everyone. Welcome to your Senate.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move that we dispense with the reading of the Journal of the 43rd Session, Monday, January 30, 2023, and consider the same as approved.
There's no objection to the motion is approved.
Mr. President, I move that we proceed with the reference of business.
With no objection to the motion, Majority Floor Leader, let us proceed, the Secretary.
Bills on first reading. Senate number 1753, strengthening the office of the Government Corporate Council by rationalizing, further professionalizing its organization, appropriating funds therefore. Senator Angara.
The Committees on Human Rights, Civil Service, and Finance.
1754, strengthening the early childhood care development system, amending for the purpose section 6, 9, and 11 of RA 10410, and appropriating funds therefore. Senator.
To the Committees on Basic Education, Women and Children.
1755, creating a barangay to be known as Barangay Dengao in Tinok, Ifugao, and appropriating funds therefore. Senator Marcos.
To the Committee on Rules.
1756, establishing a hospital in Calasiao, Pangasinan to be known as the Calasiao District Hospital, appropriating funds therefore. Senator Marcos.
To the Committee on Rules.
1757, providing for the conversion of the Suyo Sigao del Pilar Road located in the province of Ilocos Sur into a national road, appropriating funds therefore. Senator Marcos.
To the Committee on Rules.
1758, converting the provincial road stretching from Barangay Mabini Pintor Union, Municipality of Gamu to Mangkuram Lulutan, City of Ilagan, all of the province of Isabela into a national road, appropriating funds therefore. Senator Marcos.
To the Committee on Rules.
1759, converting the name of Barangay San Mariano in Bantay, Ilocos Sur to its original name, Barangay Salacong. Senator Marcos.
To the Committee on Rules.
1760, mandating the establishment of public crematoriums in cities and municipalities and extending free cremation services to indigent families and amending for such purpose the local government code and the code of sanitation. Senator Tulfo.
To the Committees on Local Government, Health and Demography, and Finance.
1761, defining and providing for more severe penalties for large-scale exploration and exploitation of corals and coral reefs, taking endangered species and other similar acts of destruction of marine resources, further amending for the purpose certain provisions of RA 8550 as amended by RA 10654. Senator Tulfo.
To the Committees on Agriculture, Food, Environment, Natural Resources.
1762, prohibiting the use of plastic posters during the campaign season, amending for the purpose section 3 of RA 9006 as amended, otherwise known as the Fair Election Act. Senator Tulfo.
To the Committee on Electoral Reforms and People's Participation.
1763, promoting cooperative farming and providing incentives for effective implementation. Senator Tulfo.
To the Committees on Agriculture and Ways and Means.
1764, providing for the lifetime validity of person with disability identification cards, amending for the purpose RA 7277 as amended by RA 9442 and RA 10524. Senator Tulfo.
To the Committee on Social Justice, Welfare, and Rural Development.
1765, providing protection, security, and benefits for new media workers. Senator Lapid.
Committees on Labor and Employment, Public Information, Mass Media.
1766, granting full insurance coverage to all qualified agrarian reform beneficiaries of the Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Program, amending for the purpose RA 6657 as amended by RA 9700, otherwise known as the Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Law of 1988. Senator Lapid.
Committees on Agriculture, Food, and Finance.
1767, providing for free freight services and the transportation of relief goods to calamity-stricken areas. Senator Lapid.
Committee on Public Services.
1768, declaring the Binyan Heritage District in the city of Binyan a National Historical Cultural Heritage Zone. Appropriate funds therefore and for other purposes. Senator Lapid.
Committees on Culture and Arts, Tourism, and Finance.
1769, an act to designate the 6th day of January of every year as a special working holiday to be known as Tandansora Day, mandating concerned agencies to conduct events during its observance. Appropriate funds therefore and for other purposes. Senator Lapid.
To the Committees on Basic Education and Finance.
1770, creating a barangay to be known as Barangay Ibayong in Banawe, province of Ifugao. Senator Marcos.
Committee on Rules.
1771, converting the mountain province Ilocos Sur Road via the Kudak Pilipil Road into a national road and appropriating funds therefore. Senator Marcos.
To the committee,
Rules.
rules.
1772, establishing technical education skills development training and assessment centers in Municipality of Libio, Province of Dinagat Islands, and appropriating funds therefore. Senator Marcos.
Committees on Higher Technical and Vocational Education, Finance.
1773, an act establishing a TESDA Training and Assessment Center in Antipolo, Province of Rizal, to be known as the Antipolo City Training Center and Assessment Center, appropriating funds therefore. Senator Marcos.
Committee on Higher Education and Finance.
1774, increasing the bed capacity of the Benguet General Hospital in the municipality of La Trinidad, Benguet, from 200 to 400 beds, placing the hospital under the direct supervision and control of the DOH and appropriating funds therefore. Senator Marcos.
Committee on Rules.
1775, requiring all government and non-government offices and establishments to adopt policies to prevent and address the acts of bullying and other similar acts in their workplace. Senator Tulfo.
The Committees on Civil Service and Labor.
1776, providing HMO benefits to all government employees in the Philippines and appropriating funds therefore. Senator Tulfo.
To the Committees on Civil Service and Finance.
1777, regulating the ownership and operation of drones by private persons. Senator Tulfo.
To the Committees on Public Services and Trade and Commerce.
1778, repealing RA 4635, setting national policies on the commercial importation of used textiles and for other purposes. Senator Tulfo.
The Committees on Trade and Commerce and Ways and Means.
1779, right-sizing the national government to improve public service delivery and for other purposes. Senator Tulfo.
To the Committees on Civil Service, Government Reorganization and Finance.
1780, separating the Ifugao State University Poche campus in Alfonso Lista, Ifugao, from the IFSU in the municipality of Lamut, province of Ifugao, converting it into a state college to be known as the Eastern Cordillera State College of Agriculture, Science and Technology, integrating therewith the IFSU Lupao campus, henceforth to be known as the ESCAS Lupao campus and appropriating funds therefore. Senator Marcos.
Committees on Higher Technical Vocational Education, Ways and Means and Finance.
1781, dividing barangay poblacion in the municipality of La Paz, province of Agra, into distinct and independent barangays to be known as Barangay North Poblacion and Barangay South Poblacion. Senator Marcos.
To the Committee on Rules.
1782, converting the La Paz District Hospital in the municipality of La Paz, province of Abra, into a general hospital under the full authority and technical supervision of the DOH to be known as the La Paz General Hospital, increasing its bed capacity from 25 beds to 100 beds and appropriating funds therefore. Senator Marcos.
To the Committee on Rules.
Resolutions. Proposed Senate Resolution number 382, congratulating and commending Sandrex Gainsan for winning the gold medal in the Guangzhou event of the 8th Junior Wushu Championship held in Tangerang, Indonesia. Senator Villanueva.
To the Committee on Rules.
383, congratulating and commending Sofiel Prahati de la Cruz for winning 2 gold medals and 1 silver medal for the Philippines in the 2022 International Federation of Sport Climbing Asian Kids Championship held in Jamshedpur, India. Senator Villanueva.
Committee on Rules.
384, recognizing, congratulating Jovan Medallo, Renz Laquel, and Chen Diosores for their stellar performances at the Asian Kickboxing Championship 2022. Senator Villanueva.
Committee on Rules.
385, directing the appropriate Senate committee to conduct an inquiry on the state of food security in the Philippines. Senator Villanueva.
Committee on Agriculture and Food.
386, directing the Committee on Tourism to inquire into the current capacity of our efforts to receive influx of travelers and tourists as our country opens borders for tourism. Senator Binay.
Committee on Tourism and Public Services.
387, recognizing and commending the outstanding Filipino TOEFL awardees for 2022 for their exemplary contributions to nation building. Senator Revilla Jr.
To the Committee on Rules.
388, congratulating and recognizing Filipina Beach Volleyball Power Duo, Cherry Ann CC Rondina and Jovelyn Gonzaga for winning the championship in Volleyball World Beach Pro Tour Futures held on December 9 to 12, 2022 in Subic, Zambales. Senator Revilla Jr.
To the Committee on Rules.
389, recognizing and commending the 2022 outstanding rural women for being role models for women empowerment. Senator Revilla Jr.
To the Committee on Rules.
390, directing the appropriate committees of the Senate to conduct an inquiry on the recent technical glitch in the country's air traffic management system with a view to improving the Philippines' overall air traffic services, utilizing it as an engine of further economic growth and aligning the relevant agencies' plans with the goals of the Philippine Development Plan 2023 to 2028 to spur the economy, revitalize the tourism sector, and create more opportunities for job generation. Senator Villanueva.
to the Committee on Public Services.
391, directing the Senate Committee on Public Services to conduct an inquiry on the shutdown of Philippine airspace on January 1, 2023, with the end review evaluating Philippine airport operations and management, including its existing facilities and equipment, assessing the shutdown's tourism and economic impacts, and protecting the rights of the passengers for comfort and efficiency. Senator Revilla Jr.
To the Committee on Public Services.
392, directing the appropriate Senate committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of urgent remedial legislation on the reported power outage and technical issues in the Ninoy Aquino International Airport on January 1, 2023, which resulted in the cancellation of hundreds of flights, inconvenience of thousands of passengers, and the shutdown of the Philippine airspace, thereby further adversely impacting the image of the country as a tourism destination and hurting the national economy. Senator Estrada.
To the Committee on Public Services.
393, congratulating and commending the Philippine contingent to the 2022 Asian Kickboxing Championships held in Bangkok, Thailand, for winning 4 gold, 1 silver, and 6 bronze medals. Senator Estrada.
Committee on Rules.
394, directing the Committee on Labor, Employment, and Human Resources Development and other appropriate committees of the Senate to conduct an inquiry on the government programs and initiatives to prepare and protect the banana industry from the further spread of the TR4 fungus and other diseases, and further expand the potential of the banana industry as an employment generator in the country. Senator Villanueva.
To the Committee on Rules.
395.
Committee on Agriculture, Labor, and Employment.
395, recognizing and congratulating the Philippine wrestling team for their outstanding performance at the 2022 Southeast Asian Wrestling Championships. Senator Villanueva.
Committee on Rules.
396, congratulating the Philippine kickboxing delegation for the exceptional performances at the 2022 Asian Kickboxing Championships. Senator Villanueva.
To the Committee on Rules.
397, congratulating the Philippine Junior National Swimming Team for the exceptional performance at the 44th Southeast Asian Age Group Swimming Championships. Senator Villanueva.
To the Committee on Rules.
398, recognizing and congratulating the team behind the short film, The Headhunter's Daughter, for winning the short film Grand Jury Prize at 2022 Sundance Film Festival. Senator Villanueva.
To the Committee on Rules.
399, recognizing and congratulating the team behind the film Lenore Will Never Die for winning the Special Jury Prize for Innovative Spirit at 2022 Sundance Film Festival. Senator Villanueva.
Committee on Rules.
400, directing the Senate Committee on Public Services to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the recent airport navigation system fiasco that paralyzed the operation of the NAIA, reduced the safety of travelers, and posed national security concerns with the end in view of strengthening and ensuring safety in the aviation industry and prevention of any other similar incidents in the future. Senator Ejercito.
Committee on Public Services.
401, directing the appropriate Senate committee to conduct an inquiry into the New Year system failure crisis at the Ninoy Aquino International Airport, resulting in the breakdown of air traffic control and the disruption of a total of 282 flights affecting around 56,000 passengers at Ontiveros.
To the Committee on Public Services. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, as you acknowledged a while ago, we would just like to again put on record that the President of LSPU, Dr. Mario Briones, with the
Yes.
VP for Admin Engineer Beltran Pedregal, Engineer Manuel Luis Alvarez, Attorney Rashid J. Sancon, and Punong Barangay Vicente Carlos Llamas are all here today, and we wanted to put on record that we appreciate their presence in this August chamber.
Welcome to your Senate, sir. Gentlemen, ladies.
Thank you. Mr. President, with the consent of the body, I move that we resume consideration Senate Bill number 1604 under Committee Report number 17. This is Aral Program Act, Mr. President.
There being no objection to the motion of the Majority Floor Leader, motion is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, the parliamentary status of this measure is that we have sponsored the measure, and I now move that we open the period of interpellations and debate and recognize the sponsor, no other than the chairperson of the Senate Committee on Basic Education, Senator Win Gatchalian, and to interpellate our Minority Floor Leader, Senator Aquilino Coco Pimentel III.
We recognize a distinguished sponsor, Senator Win Gatchalian, and to interpolate a distinguished Minority Floor Leader, Senator Coco Pimentel III.
Thank you, Mr. President. With the permission of our distinguished and very hardworking colleague, the chair of our Basic Education Committee, I'd like to start my interpellation, Mr. President, with the understanding that uh, I know we are pressed for time because we have an official event where senators have been invited. So if I could just start the interpellation, Mr. President, but please do not expect me to finish the interpellation today, Mr. Chairman.
Yes,
With
yes,
that
Mr.
understanding.
Chairman. With
Yes, thank you.
yes, I'll be more than happy to receive questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you,
Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. The measure we are discussing is an act, has the title, an act establishing an academic recovery and accessible learning program, appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes. As I understand the measure, is this just a supplement to the regular curriculum of our basic education, Mr. President?
No, Mr. President. Mr. President, this is the the bill has two objectives, and the objectives is to help out students who did not enroll during school year 2020, 2020 to 2021, and those who fall below the minimum proficiency levels required in language, math, and science. So, meaning, Mr. President, it will be a continuing program because those students who fall below the minimum proficiency levels will be assisted to be able to improve in the language of math, language, and science, Mr. President. So it will be a continuing program, Mr. President.
So it becomes part of the curriculum, Mr. President?
It will not be part of the curriculum, Mr. President. It's a program outside of the curriculum. So it's akin to a tutoring program or a remediation program, Mr. President, because we detected that the pandemic caused a lot of damage in terms of the proficiency levels of our students, Mr. President.
Yesterday, Mr. President, there was some sort of a summit, an education summit held in a nearby hotel. I have not really read about the event in detail, but I think, Mr. President, that our Senate President was present.
I was
and
present as well, Mr.
The
President.
chairman was also present. I think the program is called Matatag.
The theme is called Matatag, Mr. President. It
The theme,
centers
okay.
on access, quality, equity, and well-being, Mr. President.
Yes, Mr. President. And then this measure was filed before that summit. So may we know from the chairman himself, Mr. President, if from what he got from the summit, if some of the ideas expressed in the summit or to be pursued by the DepEd would touch on some of the ideas, concepts, and plans mentioned in the measure that we are discussing.
Thank you for that question, Mr. President. The summit yesterday presented a list of solutions to a list of problems. No? And the summit yesterday was quite comprehensive in terms of the discussion on what our students and what our education system is experiencing right now. The only common direction between this bill and that bill is the focus on numeracy and literacy, meaning reading and counting. No? This bill aims to improve the proficiency levels on those fundamental skills because if a child cannot read, if a child cannot count, it's very difficult for the child to progress throughout life. So this bill aims to focus on language, which is basically reading and comprehension, mathematics, which is counting, and science, which is the base for innovation, Mr. President. So we're not going to touch on history. We're not going to touch on the other subjects like edukasyon edukasyon sa pagpapakatao, which is basically history, and the other subject. Sorry, Mr. President, and other subjects. No? So basically, this bill will just focus on math, science, and English, math, science, and reading, to be exact.
So, Mr. President, thank you for
Guluhan na
the
ako.
information shared by our chairman. So, is it correct to say that the measure that we are now discussing does not need any change even after the presentation of the Matatag program yesterday with the Department of Education?
No, Mr. President. Mr. President, from what I gathered yesterday, the Vice President and DepEd intends to intensify its programs on math and reading. No? And that's very clear yesterday. In fact, I wrote that in my notes. This bill aims to do the same. No? So it will complement that direction insofar as reading and math. But in terms of, let's say, curriculum change, the other subjects like trigonometry, history, the other subjects, this bill will not touch on that, Mr. President. So while DepEd will pursue its activities, this bill will be outside of those regular activities because this will only touch on students who are having problems with those three subjects, namely language, math, and science.
The coverage, Mr. President, is found in section 2. So,
Yes, Mr. President.
these are the learners which are to be covered by the measure. Is the coverage mandatory or optional?
It's mandatory, Mr. President. So those who did not enroll starting school year 2020, which is the pandemic year, and those who fall below the minimum proficiency level. So we expanded it, Mr. President, because even prior to the pandemic, we also saw that a lot of students fell below the minimum proficiency levels, and we need to assist them. We need to come up with an intervention program so they can catch up with their peers at the same grade level, Mr. President.
So it's mandatory, Mr. President.
It's mandatory,
Yes.
Mr. President.
And
It
then
basically-
in paragraph 2 of section 2, for those similarly situated in the private schools, this is optional
Yes, Mr. President.
because they need to
Upon
request.
request. Yes, Mr.
So they make the request to the DepEd.
Yes, Mr.
And
President.
the tutorial activities happen where? Are made where, Mr. President? In the private school premises or in the public school premises? For the private school students.
In safe schools. Yeah. But the safe schools is for the public school, Mr. President. The local school will work with the LGUs because the LGUs also has the mandate to provide safe areas conducive for tutorial lessons. For example, if that will be happening outside the schools, the local division will work with the local government units to find a suitable place. For private schools, they have to discuss it with the school division on where the tutorial will happen, Mr. President.
Details are to be determined in the IRR, Mr. President.
Yeah. Yeah, but where is the safe schools here? Provision. In safe schools. Ayan, safe learning environment. Yeah. Mr. President, on section 16, it's written here, the DepEd in collaboration with the LGU concerned shall provide a safe learning environment for
Ayun na.
face-to-face tutorials,
Yan na.
giving due consideration to accessibility, cost effectiveness, and health safety. So, because we are also expecting that the tutorial might happen in communities, in remote areas. So the school needs to work with the local government units in order to find that safe learning environment. So
Okay.
in both cases, Mr. President, they have to work with the local government unit.
So at least we have established today that the ARAL program is mandatory for,
Yes, Mr. President.
for those covered in the public school system, because I had the impression all along that this would be optional, because the the concept which comes to mind when I first read the measure is that this is a tutorial session. And if it's a tutorial, it supplements the the study of the learner. But that should be at the option of the learner. So now, if we make this mandatory, meaning to say that the covered learners are now expected to extend their school time by the number of hours required under the program. And how many hours would this be, Mr. President, on a per school day basis, Mr. President?
Section 4. Well, Mr. President, during our technical working group, Mr. President, um, our experts advise us that there's no single solution for students who are qualified in this bill. Each student will have their own sets of difficulty, their own challenges, and it's important that the intervention is learner-based. Of course, tutor is the most popular. It can be one-on-one tutoring, it can be group tutoring, it can even be class tutoring. Remediation is also a popular approach, but we will leave that to the DepEd, to the school, to design what type of intervention programs is appropriate for the child, Mr. President. So in section 4B, we mentioned there that the intervention program should be well designed and it should be learner-centered approach. So it should be what the learner needs based on their assessment and based on their analysis of the requirements of the learner. So it's not going to be a one-size-fits-all, meaning we'll get a teacher and implement a tutoring program. It can be a one-on-one approach. It can be several approaches. It's important to determine first what the child needs in order to catch up, in order to be at par with their peers.
Yes, but since this is mandatory, from the point of view of the child learner, it becomes part of his or the consequences of his or her enrollment in school. Ganun po mangyayari yun. So there will be additional hours spent by the learner in school, most likely in school. So the question now is, don't we have a problem with space in schools? I thought we have. Do we still have shifts in schools as of today?
It depends, Mr. President. In urban areas such as Metro Manila, some areas, some schools will have overpopulation. But in rural areas, typically the average is about 30 students per classroom. But Mr. President, what the approach here is really what the learner needs, and the learner might need only 30 minutes of intervention, might need an hour of intervention. It really depends on what the learner will require in order to catch up. So part of the requirements of the program is an assessment. No? We need to do an assessment first. And the reason why we also made it mandatory, because we cannot allow some students to fall behind. No? All students should be able to be at par with their peers and to catch up. No? So if we make it optional, we will have a case wherein some students will fall behind their peers, and some students will not will have difficulty in terms of their they call it foundational skills such as reading and math. No? So in order to limit time, we also limited the number of subjects that this bill will cover, which is the fundamental subjects.
Tatlo.
Tatlo lang. Yeah.
So math, science, and reading?
And reading.
Okay. So, Mr. President, wouldn't the math teacher know who are those lagging behind in his or her math class? Same with the science and reading teachers.
Yes, Mr. President.
So actually, there's no need to assess the
Yeah.
on a per learner basis feedback from the teacher. He can already identify if that student is weak in all three subjects, his name will appear, his or her
Yeah.
name will appear three times, and then intervention can already be done. Can it not be done during the regular class hour for that particular subject? Because the teacher knows I have 30 students, 10, 10 are really lagging behind. They lack they lack the necessary competence in the subject. So I will, during class hour, I can make them do some other kind of work to catch up. Is that possible, Mr. President?
Yes, Mr. President, that's highly possible, Mr. President. In fact, some students may just require extra attention in class. So you don't need to have remedial sessions or tutoring sessions. So that's possible, Mr. President. So in other words, students can pursue their normal class activities, and teachers will just take note that some students will need extra attention in order to catch up. So it's really it really depends on the situation inside the classroom, because not all students are the same, Mr. President. We really try to avoid having a one size fits all approach, you know, because the students will have different needs. Students will have probably different levels of competencies, and we will leave that to the teachers to determine.
Yes, Mr. President, but in the context of the ARAL measure or the ARAL bill, we have limited ourselves to three subjects: math, science, and reading. So we can actually already imagine what will happen on the ground when we have this law, or what it hopes to achieve. My question is, cannot the objectives be achieved even without this law becoming a measure, but the idea being adopted by DepEd and already implemented in the regular math, science, and reading class hours? Because what will happen is the student covered with the ARAL program, it being now mandatory, will be required to spend extra hours for either math, science, or reading, or any or all, the combination or all of the three. And yet that covered student also spends the regular class hour for math, science, and reading. So the intervention should have already been made during the regular class hour, Mr. President.
I get your point, Mr. President. That is the best case scenario and most practical scenario, Mr. President. But we cannot isolate the fact that some students are lagging, and because of the pandemic, some students are in dire need of intervention. And we have experience in this type of intervention in Valenzuela, Mr. President. We found out that our students from grade 1 to grade 3, a big chunk of them cannot read. No? I think almost half, no? 40% to 50%. And what we did is we mandated them to come to school 1 hour every Saturday in addition, to teach them simply how to read. No? And in Valenzuela, we tapped our college students as tutors, no? For them to teach the students how to read. That is also the same concept that we applied here. In the best case scenario, it's a teacher that will help the students catch up. But there are some cases that you need extra help or extra intervention for the teacher. So in the bill, what we propose also is to tap college students. If you're a college student, if you're an education student, you can qualify as part of the tutor. So DepEd now will have an army or a contingent of tutors that can help the student in case that the student needs extra help, whether it's after class or it's Saturday. at least there's now a ready contingent that can help the student.
Yes, Mr. President, sometimes a student gets a tutor so that he will be ahead of their subject matter. The ARAL program is for those who are behind, to allow them to catch up.
Yeah.
So if these learners have regular math, science, and reading classes, and no intervention to catch up is made during those regular class hours, so are we allowing them to lag further behind and then resort to ARAL for them to catch up? I mean, so parang sayang. I mean, so the intervention, the flexibility must already be with the math, science, and reading teacher to have some segmentation in his or her class so that he or she will allow the teacher will allow those who are falling behind to catch up during the regular class hours.
Yeah.
Kasi otherwise, if aral pala sa Sabado, from Monday to Friday, we are allowing those lagging behind to lag further behind. I mean, that's a possibility, Mr. President. Sayang yung time eh.
Yeah,
Sayang time.
I get the point of the good minority leader, Mr. President. I am absolutely sure that a teacher would want to teach and want to pass all their students. No, I think that's their moral conviction to make sure that their students are learning, and eventually after the grade period, they will pass. But we also have to admit that some students are in need of additional help in terms of fundamental skills. We're just isolating fundamental skills because these are the skills that they need in order to participate in much more complicated subjects, Mr. President. So definitely, this teacher will try their best to teach the student right there and then. But in an event that the student will need additional help, at least DepEd can tap other warm bodies, other contingent, other personalities who can help them train, teach, tutor the students in order to acquire minimum proficiency levels. So that is the concept, Mr. President. We're not encouraging students to be isolated right away. That's why the assessment here is very important. In the provision, there's a provision here, section 4. The determination and assessment of learners is very important, and that will be the process in order to know which learners need additional intervention programs in order for the learner to catch up.
So thank you, Mr. President. At least we have discussed the concept behind the measure. If the chairman will allow, we intend to discuss further the concepts, the general principles, and also go over the bill in detail at some other future time, Mr. President.
Mr. President,
And,
yeah, definitely. But Mr. President, with the indulgence of the good minority leader, if he will allow me to show some statistics on why we saw this is necessary. Aside from DepEd's wholehearted support for this bill, if the good minority leader will allow us to show on the slide. So just a few slides, Mr. President, on learning loss. And this is one of the most important statistic or data that I can show. Pre-pandemic level, and let me just flash on the slide. Slide number 7. The number of students, the number of 10-year-olds who can read and understand a simple story pre-pandemic is about 69%. No? So meaning only 30% can understand. The 69% cannot understand. Because of the pandemic, it became worse. 90% of our 10-year-olds cannot read and read or understand a simple story. And this is from the World Bank. At the same time, there's a metric called learning loss in terms of LAYS, which is learning adjusted years of schooling. In short, this is slide number 6, Mr. President. Pre-pandemic level, because we are in a 12-year system, our students in the Philippines only learn 7.5 years in terms of learning, because of quality, because of number of days, because of many factors. But because of the pandemic, that 7.5 years was reduced to 5.8 years. So meaning, even though the student attends school for 12 years, the student will only learn 5.8 years of learning. And USAID also conducted what they call a rapid assessment. No, it's a comprehensive rapid literacy assessment sponsored by USAID. And and this is only literacy, meaning reading lang. No, on slide 11, just goes to show for grade 1, only 40% of our grade 1. This is NCR, no? This is in NCR. Only 40% in NCR is grade ready, meaning they're ready to they're ready for school in terms of reading. No? For grade 2, it's only 36%. In grade 3 is 25%. This determines the readiness of our students in terms of reading. And this is already in NCR, wherein there is internet connection, there is connectivity, and there are qualified teachers. If you go to the rural areas, let's say Region 5 in Bicol, it's even worse. No? The USAID study showed us that that 85% of our basic education, 85% of our grade 1 is not ready. And then 75% is not ready. Baliktad. Only 85%.
Tama. Not grade ready. Or not.
Sorry. Only 85% is 85% is not ready. No, baliktad na hilo lang ako, Mr. President.
Yeah.
75% is not ready and 64% is not ready for grade 3. Sorry for the confusion, Mr. President. So this determines the readiness conducted by an independent group, USAID, Mr. President. So we took all of this information and based on our analysis that we need an intervention program, a massive intervention program to raise the readiness of our students, Mr. President. So those are the numbers that we saw during the hearing, Mr. President.
So thank you for the information, Mr. President. When we resume our interpellation, we will raise the question of the budget implication of the program, the manpower needs of the program, and we intend to revisit the mandatory nature of the program, Mr. President, because if this is the point of this representation, Mr. President, is this is, using the words of our chairman, a massive intervention program, a mandatory massive intervention program. But isn't the most massive intervention program already our public education system? So the adjustment should be done already in that usual or normal massive intervention program called the public education system.
The most massive intervention program is going back to school. I think that is the best intervention program that our government implemented. But we have to admit, no, we have almost 23 million students in our public schools, and they're not in the same level in terms of proficiency. Some of them, especially the most marginalized ones, are not in the same level with some of their peers, and that's why, based on the data that we saw the need to come up with an intervention program that can tap other qualified personalities that can help DepEd. I think within DepEd alone, it's going to be very difficult and it will take time. So with additional help from existing infrastructure, no, such as students studying in college, students taking up teaching courses or teacher courses, those are existing warm bodies that are ready to help DepEd in terms of providing intervention programs.
And Mr. President, because we're talking about fundamentals here, right? The learner has been assessed to lack the fundamentals in math, science, and reading needed for his or her particular grade level to understand
Yeah.
the subject matter in
Yeah.
math, science, and reading for that grade level where he or she is.
Yeah.
So he or she lacks that so-called fundamentals.
Yes, correct, Mr.
So-
President.
And the inadequacy in the fundamentals may not only be attributable to mental or intellectual capacity. Sometimes maybe there's a reason absent. So I think we have to entertain that possibility. So if a student is already lagging behind due to numerous absences in the regular class hours, and our intervention is a mandatory additional time spent in school, then I do not know if those with that kind of a problem can be benefited by the RL program, because absence na nga, it was the physical absence from school which led to the assessment that he or she is lacking in the fundamentals, Mr. President.
Yeah. Well, Mr. President, it's really not going to be the first option. Intervention will not be the first option, for sure. Our teachers are trained to teach our students in order for them to learn and to be at par with their peers in the same grade level. Teachers will not immediately throw the child to a tutoring program or an intervention program. But we have to admit that some students, because of the pandemic, lag behind, no, in terms of the fundamental or the foundational skills, and we need to help them. If they will be left alone, they might pass because out of pity, but they will have very difficult time participating in the next or the higher grade level, and that will be a problem, a long-term problem for us. So we saw it fit that a few hours of intervention program, and the hours can be as short as 1 hour, maybe 2 hours. But based on our experience in Valenzuela, a 2-hour reading program once a week helps a lot. No? And that's only
Is that mandatory? I mean,
it's mandatory.
in
We made
Venezuela?
it mandatory, and that only ran for 2 months, because our theory there and our experience there is it didn't do anything, because the other option is not do anything. If you don't do anything, those students will naturally fall behind, probably fall to the probably retain or not pass to the next grade level, and probably drop out. The students who have extreme difficulty in classes will probably drop out and work or do something else. You know? So that's what we're trying to avoid also, the dropping out of students in our school system.
So when we resume our interpellation, Mr. President, maybe we should be informed more of what happened in Valenzuela. If it was a mandatory program, I'm sure not all were able to comply. So what was the consequence of those who failed to comply with the mandatory character of the program? But at any rate, Mr. President, it's already past 4 p.m. So time flies very fast when you're enjoying what you do, you're doing, Mr. President. So we're enjoying our discussion here with our well-prepared, well-informed chairman of our committee. So if I could request for a suspension of my interpellation, but when we resume, we can talk about the budgetary impact, the manpower source, maybe the number of those covered, and then if we can revisit and discuss again why the need for the mandatory nature of the program, Mr. President.
Yes,
Among
yes.
others, Mr.
Yes, Mr. President, thank you very much for the questions of our good minority leader. Definitely, it enriched our records, and we'll be more than happy to discuss the bill during the next session. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
We suspend, Mr. President, our interpellation.
Session suspended.
President, I move that we suspend consideration of Senate Bill number 1604. I so move, Mr. President.
Is there an objection? There being none, consideration of Senate Bill number 1604 is suspended.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move that we adjourn the session until 3 o'clock in the afternoon of Wednesday, February 1, 2023. So move, Mr. President.
Is there an objection? There being none, the session is adjourned until 3 o'clock in the afternoon of Wednesday, February 1, 2023.